Welcome to today's edition of the Statler Financial Radio Show. Your financial security is our business. Have a question for the team? Call today, 863-877-1188. That's 863-877-1188.
Thanks for joining us today on the Statler Financial Radio Show. I'm your host, Danielle J. Martin, along with Phillip Statler, the president and founder of Statler Financial Services. We've got a great show lined up for you today, talking about the 4 retirement pillars. Pillars are a classic feature of architecture, and we can all think of 1 or 2 well-known structures lined with those solid columns out front. Now, think about what would happen if you knocked one of those out. The whole thing might come down, right? But it can be the same for your retirement. So we'll get to that in a minute. Thanks for joining us today on the Statler Financial Radio Show. Phillip, how are you feeling today? I'm super excited to dive into today's topic.
Hey, I am too, Danielle. And as a matter of fact, I like the idea that we're talking about architecture because my wife and I are planning a trip to Italy, and we are working hard on what places we want to visit. And one of them is obviously the Colosseum, which I think has a lot of columns. And so that could be kind of interesting to put it all together.
I know. I'm really interested on your trip, so we would love to hear how that goes and also see how that aligns with what we're talking about. So let's jump right in. Let's go with the basics, right? So what are the 4 pillars of all retirement income plans?
So I think when we look at those pillars, you know, typically in the old houses, there was usually 4 pillars, and we have 4 pillars when it comes to our income planning. And it starts like this. We need to look at protection, because protection is where folks can put money and not expect it to go up and not down. You know, they're protecting it on the downside. Then there's the growth potential. We need to have the potential to help keep up with inflation. And so it's got to have some growth potential. That's got to be a leg or a column there. Income is important, seeing how we're doing an income plan. So income has to be a column within that. And then liquidity. Sometimes folks don't really understand what liquidity means. It comes in 2 forms, right? We have just pure savings as liquidity that we can get to it. But also we have other investments that are, quote, liquid, because you can access them at any time. And so liquidity is important because when we build the income plan, we need income, right? And that requires liquidity coming out of our accounts. So that's kind of the 4 pillars that we look at when it comes to retirement income planning.
Phillip, I appreciate you breaking each of those down. And just like with everything, there's always risk, right? And so what kind of risk are you exposing yourself to by not having a 4-pillar retirement plan?
Well, I think one of the things is if we are, if we look at those 4 pillars, and let's just say we knock one out. What if we knocked out the protection pillar? We didn't worry about protection. Well, and the stock market takes that big dive right before you want to retire. That can be a crumbling of the roof of your whole plan. And so that's why it becomes important. Or you look at liquidity, right? If liquidity is one of my columns and all of a sudden I have no liquidity, all of my money is tied up and I need some cash flow, well, what's going to happen? Well, we don't have access to it. So all 4 of these pillars are vitally important when it comes to constructing that whole retirement income plan. And Danielle, that's exactly why I created the core retirement design, to help people put together that design of their retirement and where their income is going to come from, as well as what the risk looks like and tax planning and those type of things, all built into our core retirement design. It's simple. It's easy. It's 30-minute phone conversation with you and I to see where you are on the plan for retirement and to see if we can plug in and help. The best way is to give us a call at 863-877-1188 to schedule your core retirement analysis. It's simple, folks. It's a half-hour call with you and I together to determine if you are on the right path to the retirement you always dreamed of. It's a half hour, easy to do. We'll make sure that you're doing the things you need to be doing. And if not, we'll let you know and see how we may be able to help you fill in those gaps. Give us a call at 863-877-1188. That's 863-877-1188.
We always like to remind you that you do not have to plan for your retirement alone, so do not hesitate to call Phillip and his team at 863-877-1188. Again, 863-877-1188. Phillip, we're talking about the 4 pillars of retirement, and you mentioned that the 4 pillars consist of protection, growth potential, income, and liquidity. Now, these are all very diverse goals. You mentioned earlier you can't have one without the other. It kind of reminds me like baking. If you miss one ingredient, the whole thing is messed up, right? By the time you taste the cake, you're like, something's off here. So when it comes to the 4 pillars of retirement, how can one plan address all of them to ensure that we have each and every one of them in the plan?
Absolutely. Danielle, you talk about baking. I look at construction, right? And so when we look at construction and we look at the blueprint, there's a blueprint for the electrician. There's a part that goes to the plumber. There's a part that goes to the carpenter. But if you look at the whole house, you got one blueprint, but you got subsections that go out to different contractors. It's kind of the same thing when we start building that income plan. And again, it kind of circles back around our core retirement design as well, because one of the things is that we have to look at those specific, talks about columns. I use buckets in our planning process, but they're the same thing, right? We look at that column for liquidity. We look at that column for income, growth potential, and protection. And so each of those have their own characteristics and their own pros and cons. And so when we put them all together, Danielle, in that planning process, they all work together. They're all interconnected. Just like building the house, we got one blueprint that everybody's looking at, but then when the electrician needs his section, he can pull it out. Same section here. We've got one major plan. And if we need to tweak a section, a column, we can go into that column and tweak whether it's a growth potential or it's income or liquidity. We can go into that section, pull it out, and make the changes that we need to make to that column of our income planning. But it all has to work together to make sure that your income is going to last the rest of your life. That's the fun part, to put that plan together.
And Phillip, you're right. I like the analogy of like the construction, like building a house, right? And so it kind of reminds me of like the foundation is the most significant piece. And so when we're talking about the 4 pillars of retirement, which one of the 4 pillars do you start with when it comes to building out a plan? Which one would you consider as like, this is the foundation of your overall retirement plan?
So I wouldn't necessarily call it the foundation, but where we start is I want to start with the risk. I want to know, your growth potential, and the growth potential bucket requires taking some risk. And so we have to measure what that risk should be for you specifically, because not everybody's risk tolerance is going to be the same. And so we want to find out what your risk number is, so that then when we start building that part or that column for potential growth, we know what the target is when we start looking at that. The other part of that is that risk is a big deal. So we also want to measure the risk that you are currently taking in your portfolio. A lot of times folks don't realize that they have more risk in their portfolio than they should have. There's a few people that don't have enough risk in their portfolio. So it can go both ways, and it's a process to determine what that is. But Danielle, that's really the starting point for us here at Statler Financial.
I appreciate that clarity. Everyone's different, and I appreciate going back to bringing that awareness of risk tolerance. How far are you into having risk? Are you not taking enough? That sounds kind of, weird for someone to say, do I need to take more risk? But this is why you and your team have built out this core retirement design. Phillip, tell me a little bit more about why this is the perfect place to start.
Because when we look at it, again, I go back as far as 2000, right? 1999, 2000, because that was the first big bubble we had. And I remember distinctly that there were folks that were getting ready to retire, and literally their 401ks went down 50% over about a 12 to 18 month period of time. And they had to put off retirement because of that significant event. The same thing happened in 2008 when people had to put off retirement because of the volatility in the market and the market declining into that bear market. And so to me, the risk part of somebody's portfolio, that potential downward movement is important, that we have that under control and that it really and truly matches up with the amount of risk that you're willing to take because of that specific scenario, and because that could happen at any time. And when it does, it can impact your income. And so that's the reason that's where I start, because that can have the biggest potential downfall to your income plan.
And this is a stat, Phillip, that we share constantly on the show about how there's nearly 70% of Americans who are missing a written financial plan. And people without a plan tend to feel less confident about their future. They have no roadmap or roadway of knowing which way to go. And it seems like without the pillars that we're talking about today, your retirement may seem a little wobbly. Does that sound correct?
Hey, that's a good analogy. I know a lot of folks out there are worried about, that they haven't saved enough, or that you won't even be able to retire when that time comes. I know most of you, based on that statistic, which I see every day in my office, you don't have a written retirement income plan. And that written retirement income plan can really, truly help you feel more financially stable, more retirement ready to pull the trigger and do that big thing, that retirement, because that is a big deal. And so I don't want you to be one of those folks that have to worry about your money all that time and whether or not you can afford to retire or not afford to retire. So that's why I developed this process, the Core Retirement Design, to help you design that retirement you always dreamed of. And it really covers 3 basic core principles. Unlike the 4 pillars, because that's part of one of the core projects we look at, we will look at risk, we want to look at taxes in retirement, and we want to look at income planning. All 3 of those areas are covered in our Core Retirement Design. Give us a call at 863-877-1188. That's 863-877-1188. It's simple. It's you and I having a simple 30-minute phone conversation to determine if you are on the right path for the retirement you always dreamed of. If you are, great. I'll let you know that, hey, you've done everything right and you're in good shape. However, if there's an area that I feel like we can help you in, I'll let you know, hey, look, maybe you can tweak this, maybe you can tweak that. It's all part of our core retirement analysis. Again, give me a call at 863-877-1188. That's 863-877-1188.
You don't want to miss out on this opportunity to talk with Phillip and his team. Again, you don't have to plan for your retirement alone. Don't hesitate to call at 863-877-1188. Again, that number is 863-877-1188. We're talking about the 4 pillars of retirement and how the 4 pillars are needed for a sturdy retirement. Now that you know what they are, coming up next, we'll dive into why each pillar is so important for your retirement. You're listening to the Statler Financial Radio Show. We'll be right back.
Needing a second opinion on your retirement plan, or to see if you are paying more than your fair share to Uncle Sam? Schedule your complimentary visit today. Text VISIT to 270-201-7080. That's VISIT to 270-201-7080.
Surprise parties can be fun.
Surprise!
Financial surprises? Not so much. Especially when you're retired. Like finding out you owe more in taxes than you thought you would, or having to go back to work to make ends meet. Maybe you'll be okay, but why not double check just to be sure? Call Phillip Statler at Statler Financial Services and schedule a no-cost retirement double check at 863-578-6448. Phillip and his team have seen their fair share of surprises over the years and know how to help you avoid them. Call 863-578-6448 to schedule your no-cost retirement double check with Phillip Statler at Statler Financial Services. Don't let a financial surprise derail your retirement options. Call 863-578-6448 now. That's 863-578-6448. You can also visit StatlerFinancial.com for more info. Advisory services are offered through Second Half Financial Partners, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor.
When you're not working, you're retired, your income is your income, right? It's your Social Security, your pension, and whatever you take out of your account. But I still feel like you need to have a bucket of emergency money.
Time to retire right. This is the Statler Financial Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Statler Financial Radio Show. I'm your host, Danielle J. Martin, along with Phillip Statler, the president and founder of Statler Financial Services. We're talking about the 4 pillars of retirement. Earlier, we were talking about how the 4 pillars are needed for a sturdy retirement. They are protection, growth potential, income, and liquidity. If you knock one of them out, it can possibly impact your retirement. So, Phillip, let's continue this conversation. Let's first start with talking about the protection in your retirement plan. What are we protecting our money from?
So in this case, we're protecting our money from market losses. So we don't want to incur a market downturn. And so one column needs to be protection so that we protect the assets that we have from market losses and still have the ability to grow them to help with the income part of our income plan.
And as we're moving on to what can you do to help taxes from taking too much of a bite out of your savings? Taxes is another reminder that we need when it comes to being proactive. It's that thing that we can't avoid. So as we're talking about market losses and protection, what can we do to help taxes from taking too much of a bite out of our savings?
Well, I think the first thing we can do, Danielle, is don't forget that taxes are coming, right? That
Yeah.
I think too many people they retire and they forget that when I pull money out of my retirement accounts, I've got taxes to do with it. And so, we always say that you don't own your IRA or your 401k or 403b on your own. You got a partner. His name's Uncle Sam. And every time you take money out, he's got his hand out because he wants his share. And you never know what that share is until you file your tax return. Maybe it's only 10%, maybe it's 12, maybe it's 30%, right? So that's where I think having the income plan helps you kind of plan out, where's my money going to come from? What does that look like? And then the other part of that is trying to look at opportunities to take advantage of whatever lower tax brackets you are in today. So like I have clients that are in a 10% tax bracket. Well, we need to be taking money out of the IRA now and pay 10% instead of down the road and pay 22%, right? So it's having the knowledge to know what needs to be done when it comes to that tax part of the whole planning process. And that's, again, one of the 3 areas that we look at specifically in our core retirement design.
And Phillip, as we're talking about taxes being one of the things that many people overlook, healthcare costs are another thing. It can deplete savings pretty fast, especially in the case of an emergency. And I'm sure you meet with clients all the time, reminding them that you have to be aware of this. So how do you help clients adequately prepare for healthcare costs in retirement?
That's a little harder to do, right? Because we know that healthcare costs are going to go up. We know that based on Fidelity study that they do every year, that the amount of spending that you're going to have for healthcare, meaning Medicare premiums, Medicare supplements, plus your copays. When we look at all of that, I think they've come up with a number over your lifetime of like $350,000, which is astronomical. But that's 30 years, basically, of you paying healthcare costs. And so I think one area and one way is that you have to build in inflation into your income plan to help offset those higher costs when it comes to medical.
And Philip, we briefly touched on this earlier about the market losses. And so I wanted to go back and ask you, should retirees still have a portion of their retirement assets invested in the market? Like, how do we protect our money from the downside of risk?
My answer is absolutely they should. Now, how much really depends. And I have some folks that are they're just so anti-market that they're not in the market. But that is not what should be happening, right? So we should have money in the market no matter what. And the question becomes how much, right? And that depends on a lot of factors. One is, what does your risk tolerance say? What is your risk number? Secondly, how old are you? How long till retirement? How long in retirement can we expect your life expectancy to be? And then the other part of that is, what's your income look like? Right? Because if you have a lot of income sources coming in from pensions and Social Security and other stuff, then the money in the stock market, you're not taking income off anyway. So it doesn't really matter from an income perspective. But I tell people, look, anywhere from 10% to 50%, if you are retired, could be in the market. The younger you are, the more exposure you can afford to have in the market. And we kind of start with the rule of 100 and then go from there. But all of that comes down to our core retirement design, Danielle, because that really focuses on that risk component of that whole planning process. How much risk should an individual have in their portfolio? And that is one of our key concepts in our core retirement design. And so we walk through that very specifically to determine what somebody's risk number is and what they currently have in their portfolio. Folks, if you don't know what your risk is, if you don't know what your risk score is on a scale of 1 to 100, you need to give us a call. 863-877-1188. That's 863-877-1188 to start your core retirement analysis.
Philip, as we're moving on to the topic of inflation, many people are concerned about it, but which one do we need more of, protection or growth? Or can we have both?
Well, I was going to say, is that a trick question? So I think we need both. I haven't sat down in a situation where we did not need both of those things to be part of the planning process. Because the older we are, the more protection we need. The younger we are, the more potential we need for growth. And so, the older we get, there has to be this balancing act between the two. And I said earlier, one of the things that I use as a starting point, and that's not necessarily the ending point, but we start with a rough number of the rule of 100, which says basically we're going to take 100, we're going to subtract your age from it, and that the balance of that is what should be at risk in the markets. Now, that's not a hard and fast rule. It's a starting point. And whether it's 10 or 15 points higher than that or 10, 15 points less than that, that depends on the risk score. Where do we come out when we measure what your risk number is? Because that is the end number to determine what that balance looks like in the planning process.
And you talked about there is potential of having both, right? So if we can go into, Philip, how do you find the right balance between growth potential and principal protection in your plan?
Well, that comes back to measuring what somebody's risk tolerance needs to be. And so we go through a questionnaire, some what if analysis to determine what somebody's risk number is. So we've got the tools to do that. And if their risk number is a 45, then we come back and build a portfolio based on potential growth and principal protection based on that number to get that portfolio somewhat close to what their risk number is. And so that process will get us really close to what that allocation of growth potential versus principal protection for their plan needs to be.
And Philip, I know you and your team have this core retirement design that helps many retirees get on track if they don't have a plan. Give us a brief overview of what this core retirement design can do for you.
So core retirement design really starts with the premise that, risk is vitally important when it comes to retirement. And so we want to measure what that risk is in your current portfolio and measure that against what the risk should be based on your risk tolerance. So that's number one. Number two is looking at taxes. We already know that in 2026, taxes are going to go up. They're going to go back to what they were prior to Trump's tax law changes. And so we need to be cognizant of that and take advantage of the lower tax brackets now. So we look at that as part of our planning process. What can we do? What tools can we institute? What plan can we put in place to take taxable money and move it from a higher tax bracket to a lower tax bracket? And then the last thing we look at in our core retirement design is we design that income plan to provide the income you need in retirement so that we've got that map to follow. And what buckets are we taking money out of, and when are we taking money out of there, and how long is that bucket going to last? That's part of the core retirement design. The best way is to give us a call at 863-877-1188 to schedule your 30-minute, no cost, no obligation phone consultation where we'll walk you through our process. We'll see where you are and where you want to be and see if you're on track for the retirement you always dreamed of. Give us a call at 863-877-1188. That's 863-877-1188.
If you have any questions about retirement, don't hesitate to call Phillip and the team at Statler Financial Services. They're here to guide you through a successful retirement. Again, that number is 863-877-1188. Again, 863-877-1188. Now, you need 4 pillars for a sturdy retirement. And coming up next, we'll get into the ways to make sure that your income pillar is solid and built to last. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
It might ramp up or it could slow down, but inflation never goes away. Do you know how it could impact your retirement savings? Text VISIT to 863-877-1188. That's VISIT to 863-877-1188.
It's nice when you get everything on your list in one place, isn't it? Phillip Statler at Statler Financial Services agrees. That's why he offers comprehensive retirement planning all under one roof. You shouldn't have to go one place for information about tax planning, another for estate planning, and another for retirement income planning. That's why Statler Financial Services was started. Phillip wanted to build a company that could help families with all aspects of their retirement. Statler Financial is more than just convenient, they're knowledgeable and experienced. To set up a meeting with Phillip Statler and his team to talk about your retirement plan, all of it, call 863-285-3815. That's 863-285-3815. Statler Financial Services, one stop for a wealth of retirement solutions. 863-285-3815. Advisory services offered through Statler Financial Services, Inc., a registered investment advisory firm in the state of Florida.
Having that financial and healthcare power of attorney set up is huge. The power of attorney is going to take care of you while you're here alive, and that's why I think it's ultimately important that you get those things taken care of.
Time to retire right. This is the Statler Financial Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Statler Financial Radio Show. I'm your host, Danielle J. Martin, along with Phillip Statler, the president and founder of Statler Financial Services. We're continuing the conversation about 4 pillars to a sturdy retirement. Now, the 4 pillars for a sturdy retirement are protection, growth potential, income, and liquidity. But first, you need that income. It's the basic pillar for which every other pillar is served to support. So, Phillip, where do most people get their income for retirement?
Well, let's start with the basics, right? The first place that most people are going to get their income is going to be from Social Security. It's something they've paid into for years and years. And when they get ready to retire, that's the trigger they're going to pull and start bringing in some Social Security. Now, your benefits are going to depend upon a lot of things, and we'll talk about that a little later. But the other thing that we can have is some people have a pension. If you work for the school system or one of the county governments or state governments, and typically you'll have an actual pension that comes in too. So you get two legs of income, right? You get the pension and you get Social Security. Not a bad way to start retirement. And then the other way that we have to get retirement income is you have to create it yourself. And that's where income planning comes into play, because a lot of times your Social Security and your pension isn't enough, especially if you just get Social Security. Then, typically you had a 401k that you dump money into, and now we have to take that 401k or 403b and we have to put that thing to work to create the income you're going to need to help, fill in the gap when it comes to income planning. So to me, that's why income planning is so important, Danielle.
Phillip, you're right. Majority of people do get their income from Social Security. So how can you help maximize your Social Security benefits? How can we ensure that those benefits last as long as we live?
Well, we know Social Security is going to last as long as we live, number one. So that's good. The second thing we know about Social Security is that if you take it early, you're going to get hit with a huge discount. And some people don't take that into consideration as much as they should. If you don't retire or if you start taking Social Security before your what they call full retirement age, then you take a haircut. And that can be as much as 30%, which is huge. You take your retirement Social Security at 62, you're taking a 30%, maybe even more haircut than what you would have gotten if you waited to 67. And I know there's reasons to do both. And then if you can wait till you're 70, then you actually earn about 32% more than what you would have earned otherwise. And so that's an area that I think that Social Security planning becomes really relevant. So many people think, well, I'm 62, I need to take my Social Security. Folks, that's not always the best choice. As a matter of fact, a lot of times it's not the best choice. And so part of our income planning process is to look at the different options folks have to pull out their Social Security and when to start it and when is the best time for somebody to take that Social Security benefit. And sometimes waiting a couple years may make a huge difference in your potential income over your lifetime.
And Phillip, let's give a scenario. Like, let's say if our Social Security or any pension income won't be enough to live on in retirement, can you talk about, are there any other options for creating lifetime income using a portion of our retirement savings?
So there are several different ways that folks can do that to help fill in the gaps there. And there's actually been a couple studies recently that have come out that show that if you will take a part of your retirement income and put it into what we call an immediate annuity, meaning that you're trading dollars for income for the rest of your life, and then you use the 4% rule on top of that, then you can actually increase your retirement income. That was actually a recent study that came out. So there are other ways to use annuities as well. The immediate annuity, once you pull that trigger, you don't have access to any of the money you put in there. All you're going to get is that monthly income coming out of there. So that can be good and that can be bad because number one, you can't outlive it. Number two, you can't get to it. So that may be okay for some folks. Some annuities actually have what they call an income benefit or an income rider, which will provide lifetime income over your lifetime, even if that account goes to zero. So there are things out there that you can use. Now, obviously, we've talked before about annuities. There are pros and cons, right? When we use the income rider, there are benefits and there are negative things. And so you have to balance those two things out. I will tell you this, there is not a single investment that doesn't have pros and cons. Even a bank account has pros and cons. So everything we do has those pros and cons. And so we have to weigh those things out to determine what portion should go and be allocated into these different tools to help you get to where you need to be. Give us a call at 863-877-1188. to walk through our core retirement analysis. It's simple, it's absolutely free. 863-877-1188. That's 863-877-1188.
There's no cost or obligation to talk with Phillip and his team, so do not hesitate to call that number at 863-877-1188. Again, that number is 863-877-1188. Phillip, we're continuing the conversation about the 4 pillars to your retirement. The 4th pillar, as we're coming to a close on the pillars, we've walked through each and every one of them. The last one is liquidity. Why is this so important for our retirement plan?
Well, imagine this, Danielle, is that you've got this money sitting over there, and you need some, but you can't get to it. You can't access it because the penalties are so high, or it's just locked up and it's illiquid. Well, what good is it if you can't have access to it? If it doesn't give you some cash flow, what good is it? And that's the way I look at liquidity. And so we need to have enough buckets of money that we can access what we're going to need from a cash flow standpoint and for emergencies to fund our retirement lifestyle. I mean, that's the whole reason that folks put away that money all those years, is so that when it comes time to retire, they can enjoy it. I mean, I had a conversation yesterday with a client that we were looking at and saying, okay, they came in and said, look, we've got this money, but we haven't really taken anything. And we want to travel. We want to do some things. Hey, it's not a problem. We've got liquidity in there. We can take money out. And so we ran through a couple scenarios and said, okay, look, we can take $12,000, $15,000 a year out for your travel budget. And they were excited that they could go do that type of thing. And so liquidity has to be part of the plan. And you need to know what that liquidity is when it comes to the planning process.
Phillip, I honestly love this conversation because, like you mentioned, the majority of us kind of think, I don't need any money in an emergency fund. I'm going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. But we always got to be just prepared for anything. And so how much would you say of our retirement savings should be liquid?
Well, let's distinguish between liquid and what should be in your emergency fund, because they're kind of two different things. Okay, because we can have a lot of liquidity,
right,
but not necessarily an emergency fund. So I instruct my clients that I want them to have somewhere between $20,000 and $50,000 in an emergency fund. Basically, that before interest rates went up, we still would say put that money in there. We know it's not going to earn much, but it is there where you can get your hands on it today if you needed it. And so that's the key to the emergency fund, is that if I need it today, I can get it. And so we want to have that 20 to 50,000. I don't think anybody needs more than $50,000 in an emergency fund. And so, because we don't know, what could happen, right? We could have to take an emergency trip to one of our kids, had to buy tickets today, and they're astronomical if you had to buy airline tickets for tomorrow, right? So, yes. So maybe you're going to have to spend $4,000 right there, and it's not smart to keep a bunch of money in your checking account, so making nothing. So that's what the emergency fund is for. We can take it out. We got access to it today, and take care of those things. And so that's where I think the emergency funds need to come. Now today, it's not so bad, right? Because you can stick it in a savings account, making 4.5% just in a pure savings account. So people don't feel so bad today putting that money in that savings account. So that's my opinion, at least when it comes to emergency funds.
Phillip, I appreciate that reminder. So $20,000 to $50,000 in your emergency fund is something that we need to keep in mind here as we're building out our plan to make sure we have that in our emergency fund. But just to recap everything, I know we walked through a lot of different scenarios, walked through each and every one of the pillars. But as we recap all of this, can you recap what those 4 pillars are and kind of how do you bring them all together and why they are so important?
Absolutely. So the 4 core pillars are protection, growth potential, income, and liquidity. And basically, in the process, you have to really go through the whole planning process to put all those components together. No different than building a house. We've got to put those key things into the plan. And that's how we're going to create the income down the road. And that's why I developed the core retirement design, is to help people design, just like you design a house, we design your retirement. And so we look at the possibilities that are out there. Now, sometimes you have to pare those possibilities down, just when you build a house, right? Well, maybe I can't have that specific thing I want. And so, but planning gives you the opportunity to make those changes and to understand what needs to happen if you want the Cadillac, right? If you want everything a certain way, well, maybe I have to work a couple more years. Maybe I have to do a few more things. And so that's where planning before you retire really comes of value to determine what you need to do to design that retirement you always dreamed of. Again, that's a core retirement design. For our part, we offer you 30 minutes of our time, no cost, no obligation. We'll see where you are in the process of your retirement planning. What pieces do you have in place? And then I'll look and say, okay, well, have you thought of this or have you thought of that? Or maybe these are things you need to do. But that's all part of our core retirement analysis. It's a 30-minute call. Give us a call right now to schedule your core retirement analysis. It's 863-877-1188. That's 863-877-1188.
You do not want to miss this opportunity to talk with Phillip and his team. They've been doing this for years, so do not hesitate to call at 863-877-1188. Again, 863-877-1188. Coming up next, we're diving into our Statler Financial Radio mailbag, where we answer some of your retirement questions, so you don't want to miss out on this. We'll be right back.
Needing a second opinion on your retirement plan or to see if you are paying more than your fair share to Uncle Sam? Schedule your complimentary visit today. Text VISIT to 270-201-7080. That's VISIT to 270-201-7080.
Surprise parties can be fun. Financial surprises? Not so much, especially when you're retired. Like finding out you owe more in taxes than you thought you would, or having to go back to work to make ends meet. Maybe you'll be okay, but why not double check just to be sure? Call Phillip Statler at Statler Financial Services and schedule a no-cost retirement double check at 863-578-6448. Phillip and his team have seen their fair share of surprises over the years and know how to help you avoid them. Call 863-578-6448 to schedule your no-cost retirement double check with Phillip Statler at Statler Financial Services. Don't let a financial surprise derail your retirement options. Call 863-578-6448 now. That's 863-578-6448. You can also visit StatlerFinancial.com for more info. Advisory services are offered through Second Half Financial Partners, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor.
Sounds like the mailman's here.
It's time to answer questions from the Statler Financial Mailbag.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Statler Financial Radio Show. I'm your host, Danielle J. Martin, along with Phillip Statler. He is the president and founder of Statler Financial Services. You know, Phillip gets questions each and every week about all things retirement. So, Phillip, I decided let's go in and, let's check in with our Statler Financial Radio Show mailbag to go over some common retirement questions. Are you ready to get started?
Absolutely, Danielle. Let's see what we got today.
Okay, let's see. So we're going to dive in. We have one from Bill from Avon Park. He says, I'm about to retire and I'm wondering if I should pay off my home first.
Bill, that's a good question. And it's one that's can be easy to answer, but let's talk about it from this standpoint. When we talk about paying off our house, a couple of things we need to know first that I don't have in front of me. And that is, what is your current interest rate on your home? And how much longer do you have to pay it off? And that would be a big deal. And so we would look at that. And then secondly, do you plan on staying here for the rest of your life in retirement? That's something we need to know to understand if that makes sense or not to pay off your house. Typically, though, I would say that if you're paying, 3% or less on your mortgage, or even 3.5%, then you probably want to keep it, because typically you should be able to earn more than that in terms of investment. Even CDs right now, you think about, are paying more than that. So there are ways that you can make more than that. You definitely want to keep the mortgage and not take your hard-earned money and pay it off.
Really good insights there, Phillip. And Bill, thank you so much for your question. Okay, Phillip, let's see who's next. We have one from Scott from Lake Passett. He says, I've been hearing a lot about Roth IRAs. I'm wondering if I should do a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA. Good question.
Good question. Hey, Scott, hold just one second. I want to go back to the other question. It just dawned on me one thing real quick. If you are planning on taking money out of a 401k or an IRA to pay off your home, a lot of times that is not a smart move because of the tax consequences. So I just wanted that just came to me as I was finishing up answering that question. So, all right, Scott, let's talk more about taxes, right? As we move into whether we should do IRAs or Roth IRAs. A lot of that is, what tax bracket are you in? I'm a firm believer. I personally use Roth IRAs. And I'll tell you why, because I feel like right now we are in the lowest tax brackets that we're going to see. Probably in my lifetime. I doubt that we'll see anything lower over my lifetime. So I'm putting money in Roth IRAs. And so I think that makes a lot of sense based on where tax rates are going to go. Now, there are some things that I think people can also start to think about when we're talking about traditional and Roth IRAs. A lot of people have money in their 401ks. They're going to roll those out to their IRAs when they get ready to retire. It's not a bad idea to start running some numbers to see, does it make sense to do some Roth conversions? Now, when you do a Roth conversion, they're not free. You have to pay the taxes on that money that you convert from your traditional IRA to the Roth. So think about that. If you say, I'm going to move $25,000 from my traditional IRA to my Roth IRA, right? I'm at a 10% tax bracket. Well, I can expect I'm going to have to pay at least $2,500 in taxes on that transfer. That may even push you into a higher tax bracket, which would push you up even higher. So you have to run the math. It's one of the things that we do in our core retirement design is run through a whole Roth scenario to see what the timeline would look like for folks. Because it also affects taxability of Social Security. If you do too much, it can make your Medicare premiums higher. There are all kinds of landmines out there that you got to be aware of when we start talking about Roth conversions, Danielle.
Phillip, I know a lot of retirees have questions about this, so definitely don't hesitate to give Phillip and his team a call at 863-877-1188. Again, that's 863-877-1188. Phillip, thank you for those insights. Okay, let's dive into our mailbag again. We have another question from Dan and Sally from Sebring. They say, I'm tired of being a landlord on my properties, but I'm not sure if I should sell them. So what are some of the pros and cons to renting out property as a supplement for retirement income?
Well, I would say let's start with the first part of your question here, because here's the deal. I kind of agree with you. It's easy to become tired of being a landlord. I was one for a while, and I don't think I'll ever be one again. It can be a problem, and I get that.
Right.
But here's what I want you to think about. Is the property paid for? I mean, I probably have more questions that need answers than before I can really tell you what direction to go. But here's some things to think about. Is the property paid for? If there's no mortgage on the property, then it's pure, rent money coming in. Granted, you still got to pay property taxes, you got to pay insurance, and obviously you got to maintain them. But it would be nice to know, if they're paid for, that poses one issue. Because rental income is a nice cash flow, right? It's good. It's got good taxability. It's, it can be not all taxable. So because you got depreciation of the house. So there's some neat things there that you can do with real estate. Obviously, when you sell it, you have to think about the capital gains you're going to have to pay. What's that going to look like? What's it going to put you in a different tax bracket? How's that going to affect the taxability of your Social Security? I've had people sell property and all of a sudden their Medicare premiums skyrocket because that's income. And it plays a role in the how much they have to pay in terms of Medicare Part B premiums and how much of their Social Security ends up being taxable. So it's not just a simple, should I sell them or should I keep them? If you're tired of the landlord deal, there's always a management company. Hire a management company. Let them manage it. Let them take the headaches. Mm-hmm. It costs you a little bit of money, but if there's no mortgage and they're positive cash flow, that might be the answer to your question there, guys. Take a look at that.
Phillip, I know many retirees have questions about all of these different topics that we're talking about today. And with the remaining time that we have, I want to spend a little bit more time on this core retirement design that you and your team have crafted, especially and specifically for retirees. Tell us what's inside.
Absolutely, Danielle. So our core retirement design, we worked hard to build this out. And so it starts with risk. How much risk does your portfolio have? And how much risk should it have based on your risk tolerance, your risk number on a scale of 1 to 100? Where do you land? How close are you to retirement? What's your age? And so those things all go into consideration to determine how much risk you should have in your portfolio. And I will tell you this, Danielle, of all the folks that I've met with, I'm going to say probably 60% of the folks I meet with have too much risk in their portfolio. There's another almost 30% of the folks out there who don't have enough risk in their portfolio. So it's not there's people that don't have enough. And there's about 10% of the folks out there that have about the right amount of risk in that portfolio. So the second thing we want to look at is taxability. What do taxes look like in retirement? We want to do our best to reduce your long-term tax obligation for you, your spouse, and your beneficiaries. So we look at that component. And then lastly, we look at income, because income creates a confident retirement. And so we have developed a written retirement income plan that shows us here's where the money's going to come from. Social Security, pension, and here's the amount we have to make up. Here's what it looks like. Here's where it's going to come from. We look at buckets and what bucket money's coming from when. That's our core retirement design. When it's all put together, folks are confident about their retirement. Give us a call at 863-877-1188. That's 863-877-1188 to start with your core retirement analysis.
Phillip, I always appreciate our time together. You always make retirement planning sound so easy, so thank you again for your time today. Now, if you have any questions about retirement, again, do not hesitate to call Phillip and his team at Statler Financial Services. They are here to guide you through a successful retirement. Again, do not hesitate to call Phillip and his team at 863-877-1188. That's 863-877-1188. Now, thanks again for tuning into the Statler Financial Radio Show. We'll catch you next week.
Advisory services offered through Second Half Financial Partners, LLC, a SEC-registered investment advisor. The opinions voiced and information provided in this material are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine what investments are appropriate for you, please consult with a financial advisor. Second Half Financial Partners, LLC does not provide tax or legal advice. Please consult your tax or legal advisor regarding your particular situation. This radio show is a paid placement.